13. Okay. Stripum prasanga etadrik sarvatra trasam avaha apishvaram kim uta ramyasya grihachetasah. So this is the translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation: the attraction between man and woman, or male and female, always exists everywhere, making everyone always fearful. Such feelings are present even among the controllers like Brahma and Lord Shiva, and is the cause of fear for them. What to speak of others who are attached to household life in this material world? Purport. As explained above, when the feelings of love and transcendental bliss from the spiritual world are pervertedly reflected in this material world, they are certainly the cause of bondage. As long as men feel attracted to women in this material world, and women feel attracted to men, the bondage of repeated birth and death will continue. But in the spiritual world, where there is no fear of birth and death, such feelings of separation are the cause of transcendental bliss. In the absolute reality, there are varieties of feeling, but all of them are the same quality of transcendental bliss. I'd like to say a prayer. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vidantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Ve'evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you everyone for joining. I am happy to see everyone. I pray that I can say some or share some thoughts regarding this verse, and I'd like to hear some thoughts also. I also am especially thankful to senior devotees and their blessings, that I may say some words of contribution, help, inspiration. I thank Adi Purush Prabhu and Arjuna Prabhu, and it's good to see everybody. So today, let me share the screen again. So we are in Canto 9, and in Chapter 11, we're going through the pastime of in the Ramayana. And while this is a very interesting, this chapter speaks to a very specific part of that Leela. And I want to see it in the scope, but sometimes, sometimes we are, when we're speaking on a verse or looking at a verse, we look at just what's being spoken in the commentary. And then you have to tie it back to the context of everything that's being spoken. So the first part is that I would like to look a little bit at the contents of the verse here. So back to sharing again. There's a few terms here that are important. Shripum, prasanga, and then trasham avaha. So this verse is speaking about the attraction between men and women, shripum, prasanga, and how that's just existent everywhere. And it is making everyone fearful. So I generally see verses that when I see verses that kind of look at household life or married life or the relations between men and women and see them in a negative aspect or a negative light, I'd like to pay a little bit more attention and see what's being spoken, because I think for some people it might be seen as like, well, how should I read this? For example, it says gramyasya griha chetasaha. These are people who are attached, as defined here. It's translated, who are attached to materialistic household life. So it has a kind of a view of the regular perception of things in the world, and how that is not the perception that we should have. So let me unshare there. Let me pull up my notes here. So I want to just briefly, it's only a few minutes really, when we have these discussions, that there is a discussion here that in Prabhupada's commentary, that the feelings of love and transcendental bliss from the spiritual world are pervertedly reflected in this material world. So I thought that this is basically looking at how I'd like to kind of divide what I'm thinking into two parts. The conceptual first part, I think I want to look at two concepts: lust versus, like, kama versus bhakti, comparing the two, and then how kama is related to here trasa, which is fear. In the verse here, it says, trasam abaha, stripum prasanga, etadrik sarvatra trasam abaha. So attraction between husband and wife is like this everywhere, and it is the cause of fear. So let's start here. Let me put my notes up here. So back to here. So one verse we start here with, let's start 337 actually. Most of my citations, or everything I'll be thinking in today, is through the Bhagavad Gita. If a lot of this is something we learned at the Bhakti Sastri, if you've ever had Bhakti Sastri. And this is one verse that I think of going back to my Bhakti Sastri, and then also the evolution of desire and attachment. But it starts here, a well-known verse. Kama esha kroda esha rajaguna samudbhaga maham sano mano papma vidyanam iha vairinam. And this is speaking about the idea of lust, the attraction between man and woman. Well, let's see, anything which is born out of an attraction for something, for anything other than transcendent things, for things in the world, or attachment for that, we could define as lust. And Krishna defines it here. It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Now, also here, looking more into chapter 3, which I read was text 37, continuing on, as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. Thus, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, which is lust, by regulating the senses and slay the destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And the soul, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, almighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, which is Krishna consciousness, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer the insatiable enemy known as lust. So I would go back here to our verse today. Attraction between men and women, male or female, exists everywhere, making everyone always fearful. So reading the purport, Prabhupada makes a distinction between there is a transcendental love, but in the material world, it's reflected as something other. And that other, in my interpretation, I'm reading it as kama, and that is lust for anything other than things that a desire, attraction for things that are in the world. It could be addressed as kama. Now, kama has many meanings. It could just mean a desire for something, and later when we go into say the 10th canto or Bhakti sastras, kama literally just means a desire. But in the Gita, the kama is, as we just read those verses, the kind of enemy that binds us to the world. So going back to our verse here, I'm just going to kind of look around and examine the cognitive stuff. And then I'm just going to put that down for a second, because I know this is it's just me. I have to process things. I apologize. Like sometimes I have to ponder them. Like I want to know in this, how we're connecting this attraction between men and women and woman, male and female, and how that makes everyone fearful. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to connect. And the best thing I can do is what I can only think of is in the Gita, where kama is connected to bhaya, fear. And so that's where that's where my analysis of this part is. And then after that, I want to look at this verse in the context of this whole chapter and this whole pastime. So going back here, this was our verse here, 337, with lust as the enemy, the one thing that really connects us to the world. I wanted to look at another verse here. This one is a 256. Jayato vishayan pumsha sangas te supajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodo vijayate. So while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. This is the process in which our desires connect from lust, then anger arises. And from there, we can see where fear arises. But I want to also look at this purport because this is very similar to the verse itself. Let's look here, the original verse. The attraction between men and women, male affair, always exists everywhere, making everyone very fearful, always fearful. Such feelings are present even among the controllers like Brahma and Lord Shiva, and it's the cause of fear for them. What to speak of others who are attracted to household life in the material world? And here, the Prabhupada makes a similar reference in the purport. One who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses require real engagements. If they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. In the material world, everyone, this is very similar reference to the verse we're on today, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of other demigods in the heavenly planets, is subjected to the influence of sense objects. And the only method to get out of this puzzle of material existence is to become Krishna conscious. Lord Shiva was deep in meditation, but when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasure, he agreed to the proposal. And as a result, Kartikeya was born. When Haridas Thakur was a young devotee of the Lord, he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi. But Haridas easily passed this test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. As illustrated in the above-mentioned verse of Sri Yamunacharya, a sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material sense enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. This is referring to a citation Prabhupada had made a couple verses earlier. This is that famous verse where Yamunacharya, where he sees things that are, whenever he sees or in his mind sees like sensual activities, he spits. It inspires him to spit. He's repulsed by it. This is Sri Yamunacharya is from the Sri Sampradaya, the guru of Ramanujacharya. This is the secret of success. One who is not therefore in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is sure ultimately to fail. For the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his desires. So this is what I was trying to do, is connect what seems to be a description of kama, desire for things in the world, and how from it arises fear. And here we see the process of contemplating the object of the senses, developing attachment for them. And when that kama develops, anger arises. And the following verse, let's see here. And from anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. Now, Baya isn't here directly spoken of, but it does have to do somewhere in connection with the desire for things and anger, and the fear of losing them, the fear of trying to always contain, trying to hold on to these things, and the anger or frustration that might result from that. That is the fear that comes from desire or attachment to material things, strong attachment to material things. So a couple more, a couple more verses on kama, and then I want to just look at one, I want to look at the definition of bhakti, and then I'm going to pull back from just looking at the verse. I want to look at the whole section that we've been, because it's actually very interesting. So a couple more verses, 4:10 in the Gita. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified of knowledge of me, and thus they attained transcendental love for me. here we're talking, it is raga, which is kama, attachment, and then bhaya and anger. When somebody is freed from these things and they take refuge in Krishna, they become purified in knowledge. They purified by the knowledge of Krishna, they become purified. And then from there, they attain transcendental love for Krishna, mat bhavam, the bhava of Krishna. So let's see. One who is not disturbed in mind, this is Gita 256. Even amongst the threefold miseries, we're elated when there's happiness, and one who's free from attachment, fear, and anger. That's Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, is called the sage of steady mind. So these are usually tied together. The desire, attachment to things of the world, kama, the fear that arises from trying to maintain them or keep them, even though we know that they are essentially temporary or we can't control everything, and then frustration that comes from that. So that's a very fundamental spiritual understanding, that fear, attachment leads to fear and leads to anger. And as we saw earlier, that anger could lead to delusion and forgetfulness. So this, going back to the verse here, attraction between men and women, stripum prasangaha, etadrik sarvatra trasham avaha, that this attraction that is practically everywhere in the world, in the material world, it also leads to fear, the fear to maintain those things. So that was it. That was the, sorry, that was just more of the orthodoxy, trying to understand this principle. But what I wanted to look at here, and this is in the context of this section, this is probably the part that I open up to you if anybody out there would like to, or has been contemplating this also. Here we are, let me see. So we were verse 17 here. And we're in this part of the chapter where I think Shukadev Goswami is going through the pastime of Ramachandra. And there's a part of the Ramayana that we don't read, like there was this Ramayana animation, this anime cartoon that came out in the 90s, and everybody, I mean, I loved it. You know, I was in high school, and like it was so cool. It was like this collaboration between Japan and India. The voices were Indian, but the animation was like Japanese, and it was the Ramayana, and everybody watched it. Everybody loved it, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I had it on a DVD. I watched it all the time. But that version ends with, you know, Ram defeating Ravana and Sita, and they go back to Ayodhya, and that's the happy story. But there's more to that. After they return to Ayodhya, Ram, they're in the kingdom. There's accusations, there's stories. And it's here in the verse here. Here in, let's go back. I'll share it here. And this, Adipurusha, I hope we could discuss this. I know you have some thoughts, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Let me postulate it, and let's have this discussion. I'm sure they've been having it for a couple of days probably. So Shatrughna, okay, so let's see. Here, no, this is before. Here, Shukadev on text 8. Once, while Lord Ramachandra was walking At night, incognito, hiding himself by disguise to find out the people's opinion of himself, he heard a man speaking unfavorably about his wife, Sita Devi. Speaking to his unchaste wife, the man had said, "You go to another man's house, and therefore you are unchaste and polluted. I shall not maintain you anymore. A henpecked husband like Lord Ram may accept a wife like Sita, who went to another man's house, but I am not henpecked like him, and therefore I shall not accept you again." Sukadev Goswami says, men with poor fund of knowledge and a heinous character speak nonsensically. Fearing such rascals, Lord Ramachandra abandoned his wife Sita Devi, although she was pregnant. Thus Sita Devi went to the ashram of Valmiki Muni. When the time came, the pregnant mother, Sita Devi, gave birth to twin sons, Love and Kush, later celebrated as Love and Kush. The ritualistic ceremonies for their birth were performed by Valmiki Muni. O Maharaj Parikshit, Lord Lakshman had two sons named Angada and Chitraketu, and Lord Bharata also had two sons named Taksha and Pushkala. There's a little bit of story here, and then going to text 15. Being forsaken by her husband, Sita Devi entrusted her two sons to the care of Valmiki Muni. Then, meditating upon the lotus feet of Lord Ramachandra, she entered into the earth. After hearing the news of Mother Sita's entering the earth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead was certainly aggrieved. Although he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, upon remembering the exalted qualities of Mother Sita, he could not check his grief in transcendental love. And this is the verse we are here now. The attraction between man and woman, or male and female, always exists everywhere, making everyone always fearful. Such feelings are present even among the controllers like Brahma and Lord Shiva, and is the cause of fear for them. What to speak of others who are attached to the household life in this material world. After Mother Sita entered the earth, Lord Ramachandra observed complete celibacy and performed an uninterrupted Agnihotra Yajna for 13,000 years. After completing the sacrifice, Lord Ramachandra, whose lotus feet were sometimes pierced by thorns when he lived in Dandakaranya, placed those lotus feet in the hearts of those who always think of him. Thus he entered his own abode, the Vaikuntha planet beyond the Brahma Jyoti. Lord Ramachandra's reputation for having killed Ravana with showers of arrows at the request of the demigods and for having built a bridge over the ocean does not constitute the factual glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra, whose spiritual body is always engaged in various pastimes. Lord Ramachandra has no equal or superior, and therefore he has no need to take help from the monkey. He had no need to take help from the monkeys to gain victory over Ram. I'll read it, and then text 22. Well, I'll read all of these actually. Lord Ramachandra's spotless name and fame, which vanquish all sinful reactions, are celebrated in all directions, like the ornamental cloth of the victorious elephant that conquers all directions. Great saintly persons like Markandeya Rishi still glorify his characteristics in the assemblies of the great emperors like Maharaj Yudhishthir. Similarly, all the saintly kings and all the demigods, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, worship the Lord by bowing down with their helmets. Let me offer my obeisances unto his lotus feet. Lord Ramachandra returned to his abode to which Bhakti yogis are promoted. This is the place to which all the inhabitants of Ayodhya went after they served the Lord in his manifest pastimes by offering him obeisances, touching his lotus feet, fully observing him as a father-like king, sitting or lying down with him like equals, or even just accompanying him. So, beautiful, just beautiful Bhagavatam. How beautiful is the Bhagavatam? But we read this story where Ram goes into the village and hears someone speaking about his wife, because he said he went to another man's home. that was Ravana who kidnapped her. That was not like, that was the interpretation of a poorly minded person. She was not just going to someone's house. But based on that, still Ram asked her to leave, and she did. And she lived in seclusion, and pregnant, gave birth to Love and Kush, which is another, wonderful part of the Ramayana. But the question is, many people have asked, and you could go online and ask, why? Why would he do that? Why did Ram ask Sita to leave? He knew the truth also. Why would he care about what someone else thinks? A person, he knows the truth. He knows that she didn't just go to some other man's house. Some people, as I've looked, say that because Ram is the perfect king, he felt that he had to do the thing that would not tarnish, something that would not tarnish his reputation as a king. Some people have said that. I saw one other devotee had said, well, there's another text in the Padma Purana that says actually, in a previous life, there is a story of that Sita in a previous life and Ram in a previous life had, there was some arrangement where they would be defamed by let me see, let me pull it up here. Sorry. Here, this is from Shamasundar Prabhu. I'm not sure, but I think he's the astrologer. That's a very fractally background back there. But this is, was it the Padma Purana? Well, in Hari Bhakti Vilas, which is from Sanatana Goswami, he cites a verse there. Once Lord Ramachandra's wife, Sita Devi, asked, I am neither independent nor unchaste. Moreover, I have not committed a sinful activity in this life. What sin did I commit in my previous birth so that I am now separated from my husband and we had to live in exile? When the exalted sage Valmiki heard these words, he said, you had previously fasted on Ekadasi that was mixed with Dasami, and then had worshipped Lord Janardhan. As a result of this indiscretion, you were put into the situation. Well, there's a longer story to this. It says here, well, this also, I guess he has this is a picture here of the Thai Ramayana. I was like, anyway, there's a lot of other things here. I'm sorry. Oh, wait, I haven't shared it yet. Hold on a second. Share this. Share. I was just talking to myself. I'm sorry. I thought you guys saw. There's fractal. That's the fractally background I was talking about. So this is supposedly, this is from Shamasundar Das's website. And this is the Hari Bhakti Vilas verse that I cited, he cited. But there is a story here of that there was a sage that cursed Janaka's daughter, that as you are separating me from my husband, in the same way you will be when pregnant separated from Ram. This was in a previous birth. And in Ram's city full of people, I will be born as a Sudra, that due to my words, she will be dejected and extremely unhappy due to separation from her husband. So there is also a story. There is a story that there was a past life that led to this. But is there more that we can extrapolate? How could this be? How could Ram, the perfect king, perfect husband, knowing very well that Sita was without guilt, cast her away? And there is something to be said also that as they're in the prayers that are glorifying him, that in many ways, oh, I see Athena's asking a question. I'll go into that later. I'll send you the link, but it's basically all I'm just saying is that there are stories that kind of go back and try to explain like how this happened, why this happened in this life, in this story of the Ramayana. I'm only just looking at different reasons why people might explain this. That's why I will open this to everyone here, as Ram sees Sita, knows that she's without guilt, and casts her away. I would say this. I mean, of course, there's things like Janma Karma Chame Divyam, those who understand my true pastimes. These are transcendent. These are beyond our understanding. Another explanation that for me over the years might not have satisfied me. Yes, it is beyond my understanding. But what I can say that I feel is important to me in my reading of difficult texts, listen, it's not just our tradition. It could be Job in the Bible. It could be even Jesus. Well, how could you allow that? How could a God allow that happen to his son? That was brutal. That was horrible. We see it in Islam. We see it in many passages in our tradition. I would say, and even we could say that with Krishna. There are many passages we question why is this way, and we'll question it forever. Actually, that the fact that these Leelas, these stories like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, people have been talking about them and expounding on them for generations. That is just one role of the Itihasa, is to challenge us to ask these questions of morality, of what's right or what's wrong. Even the Bhagavad Gita itself is a challenge to what is the right thing to do. But we can see in this case, and it's clarified by the purport and by the prayers after describing it, that this, especially in the purport of this verse, that this separation just is that this circumstance just conveys a deeper sense of devotion, a deeper sense of love between Sita and Ram. Because after that, Ram feels that separation and he does 13,000 years of yagya. And it's beautiful. So again, I know it's 7:56. After discussing the idea of kama and bhakti, I didn't actually discuss the definition of bhakti, which is, we all know, anyabhilasita sunyam jnana karma dinavritam. Jnana karma dimana anukulyena krishnanu silanam bhaktir uttama. Right? So actions that are like very specifically to please Krishna, and that they are without ulterior motives or material desires, and they are not influenced by jnana or karma. They're only actions to please Krishna. That's the definition of bhakti, as opposed to the definition of kama that we had kind of went through in those verses in the Gita. So I'm just going to look at these comments here. Oh, screen isn't sharing. Sorry. Yeah. So Athena, I'll share that here just to show it to you. I think you could look at this. It's I'll just put this here. It's again, there's like, yeah, it's take it. Would you? I'm not. It's not a source that I'm citing scripture. It's just an interesting. Some interesting citations here from Shamsundar Das. I'll put it here. Oh, he put it there. Okay. Well, anyway, I put it again. So anybody have any thoughts on that? Would like to share any thoughts on this pastime as we read it here in chapter 9? I was hoping Adi Purush, but he Prabhu, but I think he had to go. I also have to go. If anybody has anything they'd like to say, or I'm sure everyone has thought about this pastime in this part of the Ramayana, or maybe many have. If anybody has any thoughts on it, I'd be happy to hear also. So Rohini Dasi says, Hare Krishna, this pastime has always been a difficult one for me to read since childhood. But after a lot of contemplation, I feel the reason this happened is to show the magnitude of how important it is to keep the family fabric intact. Thank you. That's a very important thing. And it's not that, it's clear that Ram doesn't just cast her out and not think of her or not remember her. In fact, I think it's just, you could see from that 13,000 year sacrifice that there was a lot of contemplation and love. Well, thank you, everyone. And let me see. Dina's there. I have a post. Sorry if the sharing didn't happen exactly. I thought I did. My fault. But thank you again, and Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Radha Murlidhar ki jai. Shri Gaura Chandra ki jai.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.